Jackson Pierce frowned at his vibrating phone. The name Michael flashed across the screen for the 5th time that morning. With an exasperated sigh, he swiped to answer. "This better be important," Jackson said, his voice as cold as the December air outside his corner office on the 40th floor of the Pierce Industries headquarters in Manhattan. "Jackie, my man, I need a huge favor," Michael said, his voice carrying that familiar tone that always preceded trouble. Jackson pinched the bridge of his nose. He had known Michael since their boarding school days, but sometimes he wondered how they remained friends. While Jackson had built a billion-dollar technology empire through discipline and sacrifice, Michael seemed determined to experience every pleasure life offered. "I don't have time for favors. The Nakamura merger needs—" "Please, man, just hear me out," Michael pleaded. "Remember that girl I told you about, Vanessa? Well, she wants to bring her roommate to dinner tonight, and I promised I'd bring someone for her." "Absolutely not," Jackson said flatly. "Find someone else." "There is no one else. Everyone I know is either married or out of town. It's just one dinner, Jack, 4 hours max. I really like this girl." Jackson glanced at the stack of reports waiting for his review. The Nakamura deal would cement Pierce Industries as the dominant player in sustainable energy storage. He had spent 3 years pursuing this merger. "I'm busy." "You're always busy," Michael countered. "When was the last time you did anything but work?" "Since Caroline." "Don't!" Jackson cut him off, his voice sharp enough to slice steel. "Don't mention her name." A tense silence hung between them. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice gentler. "Look, just this once. I'll never ask for another favor again." Jackson knew that was a lie. Michael would always need another favor, but perhaps a few hours away from the office would clear his head. "Fine. Text me the details." "You're the best, Jack. Le Bernardin at 8. Wear something nice but not too intimidating, and try to smile for God's sake." Jackson hung up without another word. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, he watched the city below, people scurrying like ants through the streets. Once he had been among them, hungry, ambitious, believing in things like love and destiny. That naive young man had died the day Caroline walked out, taking with her his ability to trust. At 35, Jackson Pierce had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered, but he had made his peace with that reality. Hours later, Jackson's driver pulled up to Le Bernardin. The restaurant's elegant facade glowed in the evening light as snowflakes began to drift lazily from the darkening sky. "Wait here, Thomas. This won't take long," Jackson instructed his driver as he stepped onto the sidewalk. Just as he reached for the restaurant door, a commotion caught his attention. A young woman was arguing with a taxi driver half a block away. "I gave you a 20. The fare was $12, the woman insisted, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "Lady, you gave me a 5. "That's what I got," the taxi driver replied dismissively. "That's impossible. It was my last 20. Please, I need the change." The desperation in her voice was palpable. Jackson found himself walking toward the confrontation, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his commanding presence causing both parties to turn. The woman looked up at him, and Jackson felt something shift in the universe. Her eyes were a startling shade of amber, framed by dark lashes now flecked with snowflakes. She wore a simple coat that had seen better days, and her brown hair tumbled in natural waves around a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. "This is none of your business, mister," the taxi driver said gruffly. Jackson withdrew his wallet and handed the man a $50 bill. "Consider the matter settled." The driver's attitude changed instantly. "Yes, sir, thank you, sir." He quickly drove away. "You didn't need to do that," the woman said, clutching her worn purse tighter. "But thank you. I'll pay you back somehow." "That won't be necessary," Jackson replied, studying her face. There was something refreshingly authentic about her. No artifice, no calculation, just honesty and a quiet dignity despite her obvious financial struggles. "I'm Lily," she said, offering her gloved hand. "Lily Morgan." Jackson Pierce. He took her hand, surprised by the warmth that traveled up his arm from that simple contact. "Well, Jackson Pierce, now I owe you $38, Lily said with a smile that transformed her face, creating dimples in both cheeks. "Are you meeting someone?" he asked, nodding toward Le Bernardin. Lily's smile faltered. "Yes, actually, a blind date. My roommate's idea." I tried to tell her I don't have time for dating, but she insisted. A strange coincidence prickled at the back of Jackson's neck. Your roommate wouldn't happen to be Vanessa, would she? Lily's amber eyes widened. Yes. How did you know that? Before Jackson could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Running late. Stall the girls if you get there first. Jackson looked at Lily again, seeing her in a new light. This was his blind date, the roommate. But that wasn't possible. Michael would never set him up with someone so unpolished. Michael knew the type of women Jackson typically escorted, sophisticated socialites and models who understood the rules. No emotional entanglements, no expectations beyond a few weeks of mutual companionship. Lily Morgan was different. She radiated sincerity and warmth, dangerous qualities for a man who had walled off his heart. I believe I'm your blind date, Jackson said, watching her reaction carefully. Confusion, then disbelief, crossed Lily's expressive face. You? But Vanessa said... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. What did she say? Jackson asked, curious despite himself. That you were Michael's stuffy workaholic friend who needed to live a little, Lily admitted with a blush that colored her cheeks attractively. I'm sorry, that was rude to repeat. To his own surprise, Jackson laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign to his lips. That's an accurate description, actually. A gust of wind blew stronger, causing Lily to shiver. Jackson instinctively moved closer, shielding her from the cold. Shall we go inside? He suggested, gesturing toward the restaurant's entrance. Lily bit her lower lip, a nervous gesture that drew Jackson's attention to the soft fullness of her mouth. I should probably warn you that I don't belong in a place like this. I'm a kindergarten teacher. Places with more than one fork on the table intimidate me. Something about her honesty touched a place in Jackson, he thought, long dead. Tonight, you belong wherever you choose to be, he said softly. As they walked toward the restaurant door, snowflakes swirling around them, Jackson felt an unfamiliar sensation stirring in his chest. Possibility. Le Bernardin's interior was a symphony of understated elegance, soft lighting, pristine white tablecloths, and the gentle murmur of cultured conversation. Jackson watched as Lily took it all in, her amber eyes wide with undisguised wonder. This place is incredible, she whispered as the maitre d' led them to a private table near the window. I've walked past it 100 times, but never imagined I'd eat here. Jackson pulled out her chair, noticing the slight fray at the cuffs of her coat before she slipped it off. Beneath it, she wore a simple navy blue dress that, while modest, highlighted her natural grace. Michael and Vanessa are running late, Jackson explained, ordering a bottle of Bordeaux without consulting the wine list. The sommelier nodded approvingly. Of course they are, Lily said with a knowing smile. Vanessa operates on her own time zone. We call it Vanessa Standard Time, always 30 minutes behind everyone else. Michael's the same way, Jackson replied, finding himself mirroring her smile. I've programmed all our meeting times 30 minutes early in his calendar. Sounds like they're perfect for each other, Lily remarked, then added softly, which makes me wonder why they thought we would be. The question hung between them as the sommelier returned with the wine. After the ritual of tasting and approval, Jackson watched Lily take a small sip. Her eyes closed momentarily in appreciation. This is wonderful, she said, though I should warn you that my wine expertise extends to red and white, with a specialty in whatever's on sale. Jackson found himself chuckling again, twice in one evening. A personal record in recent years. Honesty is refreshing in a world where everyone has suddenly become a wine expert. Oh, I'm brutally honest. It's a character flaw, according to Vanessa. Lily's fingers played with the stem of her glass. She's been trying to improve me since we were roommates in college. Says I need to aim higher. And what do you think? Jackson asked, genuinely curious. Lily considered the question. I think happiness isn't about aiming higher, but about finding meaning. I love teaching my kindergartners, watching them discover the world, their faces when they finally sound out a word or solve a simple math problem. That's everything to me. Jackson studied her, trying to detect any artifice or calculation in her words. There was none. In his world of corporate sharks and social climbers, Lily Morgan was an anomaly, a person without an agenda. That's admirable, he said finally. To find such satisfaction in your work. What about you? Lily asked. Do you find meaning in your work, or is it just about the bottom line? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Women he dated typically asked about his yacht or his vacation homes in Aspen and Santorini. They didn't probe into his soul. Pierce Industries employs over 50,000 people globally, he answered carefully. Their livelihoods depend on my decisions. That's the CEO answer, Lily observed, her amber eyes seeing too much. I asked about Jackson, not Pierce Industries. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with another text from Michael. Emergency situation with Vanessa's sister. Can't make it. Sorry to bail, but you two enjoy. Dinner's on me. Jackson looked up from his phone to find Lily checking her own message. Their eyes met in mutual understanding. Let me guess, Jackson said dryly. They're not coming. Lily nodded, a mix of embarrassment and amusement coloring her cheeks. Vanessa claims her sister had a fashion emergency requiring immediate intervention. This was a setup, Jackson realized, irritation building in his chest. I'm sorry, Lily said, placing her napkin on the table. I should go. This is obviously not what you signed up for. Wait, Jackson said, surprising himself. We're already here. The wine is excellent. Why waste a reservation at Le Bernardin? Lily hesitated, then slowly settled back into her chair. Are you sure? I mean, we're hardly compatible. The word hung between them, and Jackson found himself considering their differences. He, with his tailored Tom Ford suit and inherited wealth, now multiplied many times over through shrewd business acumen. She, with her teacher's salary and second-hand coat, rich only in the currency of compassion and authenticity. Perhaps that's exactly why we should stay, he heard himself say, a brief respite from our usual worlds. The arrival of their appetizers, sea urchin with champagne butter and caviar for him, and a simple salad for her, the least intimidating option on the menu, she'd explained, created a natural pause in the conversation. Jackson watched as Lily cautiously tasted her first bite of truffle-infused vinaigrette, her face lighting up with pleasure. There was something captivating about her unguarded reactions, so different from the practiced poise of his usual companions. Tell me about your family, Lily said, expertly steering the conversation away from their awkward realization. Jackson's face hardened slightly. Not much to tell. My parents died in a plane crash when I was 12. I was raised by my grandfather, who taught me everything about business and nothing about life. He passed 3 years ago. I'm so sorry, Lily said, her hand instinctively moving across the table as if to touch his before she caught herself. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was a long time ago, Jackson replied, his tone making it clear this was not a topic he wished to explore. What about your family? Lily's expression softened. My dad's a mechanic in Ohio. Mom's a nurse. They've been married 35 years and still hold hands when they walk. My younger brother's a firefighter in Columbus. We're not wealthy, but we're rich in all the ways that matter. Jackson felt an unexpected pang of envy. They sound wonderful. They are, Lily confirmed, though they worry about me in the big bad city. Dad calls every Sunday to make sure I'm locking my doors and not talking to strangers. She laughed lightly. He'd have a fit knowing I'm having dinner with a billionaire stranger who rescued me from a taxi dispute. Billionaire? Jackson raised an eyebrow. You've Googled me. A blush spread across Lily's cheeks. Vanessa may have sent me a comprehensive dossier. She's very thorough when playing matchmaker. And what else did this dossier contain? Jackson asked, oddly interested in how others perceived him. Lily studied him, those amber eyes seeing too much again. That you're brilliant but ruthless in business. That you dated a model named Caroline who broke your heart 3 years ago, and since then, you've been... She stopped abruptly, biting her lip. I've been what? Jackson pressed, his voice cooler. Emotionally unavailable, Lily finished quietly. Vanessa's words, not mine. The truth of it struck him like a physical blow. Caroline had been the one person he'd allowed past his defenses after his parents' death. Her betrayal, leaving him for his chief competitor after accessing confidential company information, had confirmed what his grandfather always told him. Trust was a luxury a Pierce could never afford. Your friend has quite the imagination, Jackson said dismissively, though they both knew it wasn't imagination but accuracy. For what it's worth, Lily said gently, whoever hurt you made a terrible mistake. The sincerity in her voice threatened to crack something in Jackson's carefully constructed armor. He deflected with practiced ease. Enough about me. The dossier was unfairly one-sided. Tell me something about Lily Morgan that I won't find in a background check. The main courses arrived. Butter-poached lobster for him, roasted chicken for her, providing another welcome interruption. Lily considered his question while savoring a bite of her perfectly prepared chicken. I collect vintage children's books, she finally said. My apartment is overflowing with them. I believe they contain more wisdom than most adult philosophy texts, such as, Jackson prompted, genuinely intrigued. Sometimes, said Pooh, the smallest things take up the most room in your heart, Lily quoted with a soft smile. Winnie the Pooh understood more about what matters in life than most adults ever grasp. As they continued their meal, Jackson found himself captivated by Lily's perspective on life. She spoke of her students with such love, describing their personalities and quirks with the tenderness usually reserved for one's own children. She told him about her tiny apartment in Washington Heights that she'd transformed into a cozy haven, despite the leaky faucet and temperamental heating. She shared her dream of someday opening a bookstore with a special reading corner for children. In return, Jackson found himself revealing things he rarely discussed. His passion for restoring classic cars, a hobby he'd inherited from his father, his secret love of poetry that his grandfather would have dismissed as frivolous, the pressure of living up to the Pierce name. As their desserts arrived, a deconstructed lemon tart that looked more like art than food, Jackson realized with a start that he was enjoying himself. More than that, he was connecting with this kindergarten teacher in a way he hadn't connected with anyone in years, and that made her dangerous. The snowfall had intensified when they finally emerged from Le Bernardin, transforming Manhattan into a winter wonderland. Street lamps cast golden halos through the swirling white, and the usual cacophony of the city was muffled to a gentle hush. Beautiful, Lily whispered, turning her face upward to catch snowflakes on her cheeks. Jackson found himself watching her rather than the snow. Throughout dinner he had maintained his guard, keeping the conversation light despite their surprising compatibility. Now, seeing her childlike wonder at the transformed city, something shifted within him. Let me drive you home, he offered, nodding toward where Thomas waited with the Bentley. Lily hesitated. That's kind of you, but Washington Heights is out of your way. I can take the subway. At this hour in this weather? Jackson frowned. I insist. Before she could protest further, he guided her to the car with a light touch at the small of her back. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through his palm. Thomas opened the door with practiced efficiency, his expression revealing nothing when Jackson instructed him to drive to Washington Heights. Inside the luxurious interior of the Bentley, Lily ran her fingers over the butter-soft leather seats. So this car probably costs more than 5 years of my salary, she observed without envy or judgment, simply stating a fact. Likely more, Jackson acknowledged. Does that bother you? Lily considered the question seriously, her profile illuminated by passing streetlights. What bothers me isn't that some people have wealth. It's that so many equate wealth with worth. She turned to face him directly. You're not interesting because you're rich, Jackson. You're interesting despite it. Her words struck him speechless. Throughout his adult life, Jackson had been acutely aware that his fortune colored every interaction. Business rivals feared his financial power. Women desired access to his lifestyle. Friends like Michael leveraged their connection to him for their own benefit. No one, not since his parents, had seen him as simply Jackson. The car slowed as they approached a modest apartment building in Washington Heights. Thomas pulled to the curb and immediately came around to open Lily's door, holding an umbrella to shield her from the snow. Thank you for dinner, Lily said, turning to Jackson. It was unexpected. In a good way, I hope, he replied, surprised by how much her answer mattered to him. She smiled, that transformative smile that created twin dimples in her cheeks. Definitely in a good way. Jackson found himself stepping out of the car. I'll walk you to your door. Thomas raised an eyebrow but quickly masked his surprise, handing Jackson the umbrella. The building's lobby was clean but worn, with mailboxes that had seen better days and lighting that flickered intermittently. Jackson was struck by the contrast between this place and his own penthouse overlooking Central Park. 5th floor, Lily said as they entered the elevator. Fair warning, the elevator makes some alarming noises, but the super assures me it's perfectly safe. As if on cue, the elevator groaned and shuddered before beginning its ascent. "Define perfectly safe," Jackson muttered, earning a laugh from Lily. "It hasn't plummeted to the basement yet," she quipped, standing closer to him than strictly necessary in the small space. The proximity allowed Jackson to detect the subtle scent of vanilla and something floral. Not an expensive perfume, but perhaps a simple lotion. He found it more appealing than the designer fragrances that typically surrounded him. The elevator finally stopped with a concerning jolt, and they stepped into a narrow hallway with worn carpet. Lily led him to apartment 5D and fumbled slightly with her keys. "Well, this is me," she said, turning to face him once the door was unlocked. "Thank you again for tonight, and for rescuing me from that taxi driver." Jackson knew he should simply say good night and leave. That would be the prudent course, to end this unexpected encounter before it became complicated. Yet he found himself lingering. "Perhaps we could do this again," he heard himself say. "Properly, this time. Not as a favor to Michael and Vanessa." Lily's amber eyes widened slightly. "You want to see me again, are you sure? I mean, I'm not exactly from your world." "That might be precisely why," Jackson admitted. He reached out, almost unconsciously, to brush a snowflake from her cheek. The brief contact sent a charge through his fingertips. Lily's breath caught audibly, and for a moment the hallway seemed to shrink around them. Jackson found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn by something he couldn't name. The spell was broken by the sharp ring of his phone. Jackson stepped back, clearing his throat as he checked the screen. "I'm sorry. I have to take this. The Tokyo markets are opening." "Of course," Lily said, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face before she masked it with a smile. "Good night, Jackson." "Good night, Lily," he replied, watching as she disappeared into her apartment. On the ride back to his penthouse, Jackson found himself distracted from his call with the Tokyo office. Images of Lily kept intruding, her smile, her forthright manner, the way she saw through his practiced facades. It was unsettling. By morning, Jackson had convinced himself that the connection he'd felt with Lily Morgan had been a momentary lapse, perhaps induced by the romantic setting and falling snow. He was not the type of man to be swayed by dimples and philosophical quotes from children's books. He had an empire to run. Yet 3 days later, as he sat in a boardroom surrounded by executives from Nakamura Corp., Jackson found himself sketching small bears in the margin of his notes and wondering what Lily was teaching her kindergartners that day. "Mr. Pierce?" His CFO's voice broke through his reverie. "Your thoughts on the proposed timeline?" Jackson straightened, forcing his attention back to the meeting. "The timeline is acceptable, but the distribution rights need to be restructured. Let's take a 15-minute break." As the room cleared, Jackson's assistant, Margaret, approached with a stack of messages. "Sir, the Robinson Foundation called again about the charity gala tomorrow night. They're hoping you'll reconsider attending." Jackson normally declined such invitations, preferring to make anonymous donations rather than participate in the social spectacle. But something made him ask, "What's the cause?" "Children's literacy," Margaret replied, looking surprised at his interest. "They fund reading programs in underserved schools." Children's literacy, books, Lily's passion. The connection was too pointed to ignore. "Accept the invitation," Jackson said, "and find out if Washington Heights Elementary is one of their supported schools." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded. "Yes, sir." That evening, Jackson found himself in the unusual position of being nervous as he dialed Lily's number, which he'd obtained through a brief, awkward call to Michael. "Hello?" Her voice sounded cautious. She wouldn't recognize his number. "Lily, it's Jackson Pierce." "Jackson?" The surprise in her voice was evident. "How did you get my number?" "Michael," he admitted. "I hope that's all right." "It's fine, just unexpected," she said, her tone warming. "I thought I'd imagined how well we got along the other night." "You didn't," Jackson replied, pacing across his living room with its panoramic view of the city. "That's actually why I'm calling. There's a charity gala tomorrow night for children's literacy. I thought you might want to attend and with me." The silence that followed made him wonder if he'd miscalculated. "A charity gala?" Lily finally responded. "That sounds fancy. I don't exactly have gala-appropriate attire in my closet." "That can be arranged," Jackson offered, then immediately regretted his words when she responded with a cooler tone. "I don't need you to buy me clothes, Jackson. I didn't mean—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I apologize. That was presumptuous." Lily's sigh was audible. "It's okay. But you should know I'm not looking for a benefactor. If we're going to explore whatever this is, it needs to be as equals." "Understood," Jackson said, respecting her principles, even as he wondered how they would navigate the reality of their vastly different financial situations. "So, will you come? As my equal?" Her laugh softened the tension. "Yes, I'll come. I'll find something suitable to wear, even if I have to borrow from Vanessa's closet of fashion emergencies. I'll pick you up at 7, Jackson said, surprised by the relief that flooded through him. After they hung up, Jackson received a text from Margaret confirming that Washington Heights Elementary was indeed one of the schools supported by the Robinson Foundation. The coincidence seemed too perfect, almost like fate, if Jackson believed in such things. The following evening, Thomas pulled the Bentley to the curb outside Lily's building precisely at 7. Jackson adjusted his bow tie and stepped out, ignoring the curious glances from passers-by who recognized either him or the car or both. When Lily emerged from her building, Jackson momentarily forgot to breathe. She wore a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Her hair swept up to reveal the graceful curve of her neck. Her only jewelry was a pair of small pearl earrings. "You look beautiful," he said, meaning it more than any similar compliment he'd ever given. "Thank you," she replied with a slight blush. Vanessa came through with the dress, apparently its last season's Chanel, which she assured me was a fashion tragedy of epic proportions. Jackson smiled, offering his arm. "The tragedy would be if you weren't wearing it tonight." The Robinson Foundation Gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and as they ascended the grand staircase, Jackson was acutely aware of the stares they attracted. He was used to attention, but tonight felt different, more invasive somehow, as if the onlookers were intruding on something private. "Everyone's looking at us," Lily whispered nervously. "At you," Jackson corrected. "You outshine everyone here." Inside, the museum had been transformed for the event. Flower arrangements towered over tables draped in silk, and champagne flowed freely, as New York's elite mingled and pretended to care about children's literacy while actually caring about being seen at the right social event. Jackson introduced Lily to various business associates, watching with amusement as she charmed them with her genuine enthusiasm for education. When she engaged the mayor's wife in a passionate discussion about early childhood reading programs, Jackson felt an unfamiliar surge of pride. "She's delightful," observed Eleanor Whitmore, a longtime friend of Jackson's grandfather and one of New York's most formidable society matrons. "Refreshingly genuine. Where have you been hiding her?" "We recently met," Jackson said carefully. Eleanor's shrewd eyes narrowed. "Well, she's a vast improvement over your usual type." "Hold on to this one, Jackson." Before he could respond that Lily wasn't his to hold on to, Eleanor had moved on to greet another guest. Jackson scanned the room for Lily and found her deep in conversation with the Foundation's director. Her face was animated, hands gesturing expressively as she spoke about something that clearly mattered to her. Jackson was making his way toward them when a familiar voice stopped him cold. "Hello, Jackson. You're looking well." He turned slowly to face Caroline Bennett, as flawlessly beautiful as the day she'd walked out of his life and into his competitor's bed. "Caroline," he acknowledged coolly. "I wasn't aware you were in New York. Just flew in yesterday," she replied, her practiced smile not reaching her eyes. "Richard and I separated last month. I thought perhaps you'd heard." Jackson felt nothing, no satisfaction at her failed relationship with his business rival, no lingering pain from her betrayal, just emptiness, where strong emotion had once resided. "I hadn't," he said simply. Caroline stepped closer, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Jackie, about us, about mistakes made." Jackson removed her hand from his arm, noticing that Lily had spotted them, and was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. "There is no us, Caroline. There hasn't been for 3 years. Caroline's smile faltered. "Don't be like that. We were good together once. We could be again. Is everything okay here?" Lily's voice was calm as she approached, but Jackson could see tension in the set of her shoulders. Caroline's gaze swept over Lily, assessing and dismissing her in a single glance. "And you are?" "Lily Morgan," she answered with quiet dignity. "And you must be Caroline." Caroline's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. My reputation precedes me, I see. She turned back to Jackson. Really, darling? A school teacher? How quaint. The condescension in her tone made Jackson's jaw tighten. Lily teaches kindergarten at Washington Heights Elementary, one of the schools benefiting from tonight's gala, he said pointedly. Her work actually matters. Something shifted in Caroline's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at the protective edge in his voice. Her eyes narrowed as she looked between them, reassessing. Well, she said finally, this is an interesting development. I should go say hello to the Astors. We'll catch up later, Jackson. As Caroline sauntered away, Jackson turned to Lily. I'm sorry about that. Don't be, Lily said, her amber eyes searching his face. Are you okay? The genuine concern in her voice touched him. Surprisingly, yes, he realized. Seeing her, it didn't affect me the way it once would have. Before Lily could respond, the foundation director clinked to glass for attention, announcing that the program was about to begin. As they took their seats, Jackson felt Lily's hand briefly squeeze his, a simple gesture of support that somehow meant more than any words could have. The director spoke eloquently about the Foundation's mission before introducing a video featuring students from their partner schools. Jackson felt Lily tense beside him as familiar classroom scenes appeared on the screen. That's my class, she whispered, clutching his arm. Those are my students. And then, to Jackson's astonishment, Lily herself appeared on screen, reading to a circle of captivated children, her face animated as she gave different voices to each character in the story. As the video ended to enthusiastic applause, the director smiled. And now I'd like to introduce one of our extraordinary teachers, whose innovative reading program has shown remarkable results. Ladies and gentlemen, Lily Morgan from Washington Heights Elementary. Lily's grip on Jackson's arm tightened painfully. What? No one told me I was being recognized tonight, she whispered, panic evident in her voice. Go, Jackson encouraged softly. You deserve this. With visible trepidation, Lily made her way to the podium. For a moment she looked frozen, staring out at the sea of expectant faces. Then her gaze found Jackson, who nodded encouragingly, and something in her seemed to settle. Thank you, she began, her voice strengthening with each word. I'm honored, though completely surprised to be here tonight. I don't have a prepared speech, so I hope you'll forgive me if I simply speak from the heart about why literacy matters. What followed was 5 minutes of the most genuine, passionate advocacy for children's education that Jackson had ever witnessed. Lily spoke of specific students whose lives had been transformed by discovering the joy of reading, of the barriers facing children in underserved communities, and of the power of stories to build empathy and understanding. By the time she finished, several audience members were wiping away tears and the applause was thunderous. As Lily made her way back to their table, Jackson felt something unfamiliar expanding in his chest. A warmth that had nothing to do with pride in her performance and everything to do with admiration for who she was. The evening continued with dinner and an auction. Jackson bid aggressively on several items, including a first edition of Winnie the Pooh that made Lily gasp when he presented it to her as a gift. I can't accept this, she protested. It's too valuable. Consider it a donation to your classroom library, he countered, knowing she couldn't refuse something that would benefit her students. As the evening wound down, they stepped outside to find that the snow had stopped, leaving the city blanketed in pristine white. Thomas waited with the car, but Jackson found himself reluctant for the night to end. Would you like to walk for a bit? He suggested. It's not too cold. Lily nodded, slipping her arm through his as they strolled along the edge of Central Park. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that felt as natural as breathing. I had no idea you were being honored tonight, Jackson said eventually. Did you suspect anything? Not a clue, Lily admitted. Though now I'm wondering if Vanessa knew. She was suspiciously insistent about the dress. Jackson hesitated before confessing. I may have had something to do with it. Not the recognition. You earned that entirely on your own. But I did ask my assistant to find out if your school was supported by the foundation. Lily stopped walking, turning to face him. Why? The simple question demanded an honest answer. Jackson found himself struggling to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. Because meeting you has shifted something in me, he finally said. You see the world differently than anyone I know. You value things I'd forgotten existed. What things? Lily asked softly, her breath visible in the cold air between them. Sincerity, wonder, the belief that small kindnesses matter. Jackson took a deep breath. You make me want to be better than I am. Lily's eyes shimmered in the lamplight. I think you've always been better than you believe, Jackson. You just forgot how to see it. Something in her words, or perhaps the way she looked at him as if she truly saw him, broke through the last of Jackson's carefully constructed barriers. He leaned down, closing the distance between them, and kissed her. The world seemed to stop as Lily's lips met his, soft and yielding. Her hands came up to rest against his chest as she returned the kiss with a sweetness that made his heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, Jackson rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the space between them. The moment felt perfect, delicate and precious. Until his phone rang. Jackson pulled back with a muttered apology, checking the screen. It was Margaret, which meant an emergency at Pierce Industries. He was about to silence the call when Lily gently touched his arm. You should answer it, she said. It might be important. Reluctantly, Jackson accepted the call. Pierce. Margaret's voice was tense. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, but there's been a development with the Nakamura merger. Mr. Nakamura is threatening to pull out unless you speak with him immediately. Jackson felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him. Put him through to my secure line in 5 minutes. He ended the call and turned to Lily, regret evident in his expression. I have to go. A critical business situation. I understand, Lily said, though disappointment flickered across her face. Let me at least take you home first, Jackson offered. Lily shook her head. No. Go handle your emergency. I'll take a taxi. Absolutely not, Jackson insisted. He signaled to Thomas, who had been following discreetly in the car. Thomas will drive you home. As the Bentley pulled up alongside them, Jackson felt torn between his business obligations and his desire to stay with Lily. The feeling was unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Jackson Pierce had never been a man divided. His priorities had always been clear. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised as he opened the car door for her. Will you? Lily asked, a question in her amber eyes that went deeper than the simple words. Yes, Jackson said firmly. You have my word. As Thomas drove away with Lily, Jackson already had his secure phone out, preparing for the call with Nakamura. What he didn't prepare for was the text that arrived moments later from an unknown number. Touching scene in the park. The press will love the photos of New York's coldest CEO melting for a kindergarten teacher, unless you'd prefer they didn't. Let's discuss. $5 million seems fair. Details to follow. Jackson stared at the message, ice forming in his veins. Someone had been watching them. Someone had photographs. Someone was threatening to expose his private life to the world, and more importantly, to drag Lily into the harsh spotlight that always followed him. In that moment, Jackson realized just how dangerous his feelings for Lily Morgan had become, not just to him, but to her. Jackson paced his penthouse, staring at the blackmail text illuminated on his phone. After successfully handling the Nakamura merger, this new threat consumed his thoughts. $5 million was nothing to him financially, but paying would only invite more demands. If you pay, they'll just come back for more, his security chief Reynolds advised when consulted. Let me investigate first. And sir, you might consider distancing yourself from the lady until this is resolved. The suggestion made logical sense, the calculated decision Jackson would typically make. Cut losses, minimize damage, protect assets. Yet the thought of pulling away from Lily felt like tearing out something vital. In just a week, she had become important to him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. By dawn, Jackson had made his decision. He would handle this directly and decisively. But first he needed to see Lily. They met at a small cafe near her apartment. Jackson arrived in jeans and a sweater, a baseball cap pulled low, as close to inconspicuous as someone with his height and bearing could manage. What's happened? Lily asked immediately, reading his expression. After you left last night, I received a blackmail threat, Jackson explained quietly. Someone took photos of us in the park and is demanding money to keep them private. But we weren't doing anything wrong, she said, confused. No, but in my position, privacy is precious. The media would dig into your life, camp outside your apartment, harass your students' parents. Your classroom would become a spectacle. Understanding dawned in Lily's eyes, followed by hurt. So you're here to end things before they really begin? No, Jackson said firmly. I'm here to be honest about what continuing might mean. You deserve to make an informed choice. You think I can't handle it, Lily concluded, steel entering her voice. I think you shouldn't have to, Jackson corrected. Your life has meaning, Lily, real meaning. My world could taint that. Lily reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Shouldn't that be my decision? Yes, he acknowledged. It should. Then tell me something first, Lily said, her gaze unwavering. Is this, whatever is happening between us, real for you? Or am I just a novelty, the authentic kindergarten teacher who amuses the jaded billionaire? It's real, he said quietly. More real than anything I've felt in years. That's what scares me. Lily's expression softened. It scares me too, but I've always believed that anything worth having involves risk. Jackson's phone buzzed. Reynolds had a lead on the blackmailer. After promising to continue their conversation that evening, Jackson left to meet his security chief. The blackmail text came from a burner phone purchased with cash, Reynolds reported, but we traced the activation to a cell tower near Miss Bennett's hotel. Caroline? Jackson felt cold fury building. Reynolds showed compelling evidence. Caroline had left the gala shortly after them, following in a private car to Central Park. Everything pointed to her orchestrating the blackmail attempt. By late afternoon, Jackson had leverage. Caroline was in financial trouble after her separation from Richard Harrington. She'd been meeting with Pierce Industries' competitors, likely shopping information she didn't possess. One phone call to Richard, a business rival who nonetheless valued discretion, set a plan in motion. That evening, Lily arrived at Jackson's penthouse for dinner. As they cooked together, a simple pasta dish, she asked about the blackmailer. It was Caroline, Jackson confirmed. She saw us together and thought she could exploit it. What are you going to do? It's already done. Richard has agreed to add a confidentiality clause to their divorce settlement. If Caroline ever leaks anything related to either of us, she loses her entire settlement. Given her financial situation, she can't afford that risk. That's efficient, Lily remarked, both impressed and slightly unsettled. After dinner, they settled in the living room overlooking the glittering city. We never finished our conversation, Jackson said, about what happens next. I've been thinking about that, Lily responded thoughtfully. It's not about me fitting into your world or you fitting into mine. It's about whether we can create something new together. The wisdom of her statement struck Jackson deeply. Throughout his life he had compartmentalized, business separate from personal, emotions separate from decisions. Lily suggested an integration he had never considered possible. I don't know if I can, he admitted. I've kept people at a distance for so long. You already are changing, Lily pointed out, placing her hand against his cheek. I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking if you're willing to try something new. In that moment, Jackson understood what his grandfather had never taught him. True courage wasn't about conquering markets or outmaneuvering competitors. It was about opening yourself to connection, to the risk of loss that came with the chance of joy. I want to try, he said, covering her hand with his own. I can't promise I'll be good at it. You don't have to be perfect, Lily smiled. You just have to be willing. 6 months later, Jackson stood in Washington Heights Elementary School's gymnasium for the end-of-year celebration of Lily's kindergarten class. Mr. Pierce, are you really Miss Morgan's boyfriend? Asked a small girl with pigtails. Jackson crouched to her level. I am. Is that okay with you? I guess. But you have to be nice to her. She's the best teacher ever. I know she is, Jackson agreed. And I promise. Pinky promise? The girl held out her tiny finger. Jackson solemnly linked his much larger pinky with hers. Pinky promise. That evening, they hosted a fundraiser at his penthouse for a children's literacy initiative Lily had developed, one that would bring her teaching methods to schools across the city. As Lily moved through the crowd, convincing hardened executives to open their checkbooks, Eleanor Whitmore appeared at Jackson's side. She's remarkable, the elderly socialite observed. You've done well, Jackson. Better than your grandfather ever did, though he made more money. What do you mean? Harold was brilliant at business but a failure at life. He never understood what you're learning, that success is measured by more than profit margins. Lily caught Jackson's eye across the room, her smile radiant. "I love her," Jackson said simply. "Obviously," Eleanor replied dryly. "The question is, have you told her?" Jackson realized he hadn't, not in those exact words. He crossed the room purposefully. "I need to tell you something," he said, taking Lily's hands in his. "I love you, Lily Morgan. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stood up to that taxi driver in the snow." Tears welled in Lily's amber eyes, but her smile was brilliant. "I love you too, Jackson." As snow began to fall outside the windows, just as it had the night they met, Jackson pulled Lily close, marveling at how the cold CEO had found warmth in the heart of a kindergarten teacher who saw beyond his wealth to the man beneath. Some called it fate, others might call it coincidence. But as Jackson looked into